Hello and welcome to the Rippling Pages podcast with me, Liam Bishop, curating the best writers to help you with your writing. And we're doing that again today, but only slightly different because you're going to hear a live conversation that was recorded on Monday, May the 12th, with Katharina Volckmer, who came up to Leeds to talk about her second novel. Calls may be recorded for training and monitoring purposes. So, long-standing fans of the Rippling Pages will know how much we love The Appointment, Katharina's first novel. So I was delighted that Katharina came to Leeds to talk to me about her second novel. Today, you're going to hear the first part of our conversation. You'll hear Katharina and I talking literature in the call centre, intimacy, and there's also a bit of what we might call toilet humour. So this one does come with a content warning about some of the language used in the conversation. But otherwise, it's great to have you here. And as ever, with the Rippling Pages, please like, share, subscribe, leave a review, tell your friends about the podcast if you enjoyed this episode, or indeed any other episode. And, of course, Katharina's book will be available on the Rippling Pages bookshop, which is hosted by bookshop.org. There's a link to that in the show notes. This event in particular was supported by Next Chapter Books Leeds, an independent bookstore in Leeds. So buying from that bookstore, buying from bookshop.org.uk means that you'll be supporting indie bookshops like Next Chapter Books. Okay, let's get into it. This is Katharina Volckmer and I in conversation. Not going to use the microphones. Hope you can all understand. Sound good? Can you hear me at the back? Okay. Good evening. Hello everybody. Welcome to the Hyde Park Book Club. Delighted to have you here celebrating literary events in the north. And we are here with some of the finest upcoming talents, one in particular in world literature today, Katharina Volckmer. My name is Liam Bishop. I am a writer, critic from Leeds, also a host of the Rippling Pages podcast, which is where Katharina and I first met. So what I do on there is I curate the best writers to help you with your writing. Tonight we're doing that live in Leeds. But thank you to the Hyde Park Book Club for hosting us. Thank you to Eden for being here from Next Chapter Books. Lovely, brilliant new independent bookshop in the Corn Exchange. You've got to go down. Thanks for being here and supporting it as well. But we do have some international talent, as I said tonight. Katharina's first novel, The Appointment, was translated into over 15 languages. It was adapted for the stage, starring Camille Cottin, who I absolutely loved in Call My Agent. And it was nominated for several prizes. But tonight, Katharina is here to discuss her second novel. Calls may be recorded for training and monitoring purposes, copies of which are stacked up on Eden's table. I knew as soon as this book was released that I had to read it and I had to speak to Katharina about it. So I am delighted that she's here in Leeds to talk to us tonight as part of her book tour around the north. You've not been to Leeds before, have you? First time in Leeds? There we go. Give her a warm welcome. But Katharina's got the dual enviable honour of not only being interviewed in the Paris Review, which is something obviously that many of us envy, but she has also written for Dua Lipa. Anyone at mine and my wife's wedding will know how much we love Dua Lipa. So you must be as excited to be talking to me in Leeds, that's for sure. But yes, as you can tell, I loved Katharina's first novel, The Appointment, but I was similarly enlivened by this book as well. Katharina is in ribald mode in this funny, outlandish, and yet very melancholic novel about a man simply called Jimmie who works in a call centre. Jimmie helps holidaymakers. He gets all these weird and wonderful calls, placates some of their fears about sharks in the waters of Mykonos, Greece. We've all been there, among many other strange and wonderful calls, and that's some of the toned down ones. But he also has a complicated relationship with his mother. And he has a traumatic memory of a carving knife that threatens to burst to the surface. The Irish writer Colm Tóibín said the book is filled with brilliant dialogue, unexpected turns, some very dirty talk with sudden bursts of hilarity, and then fierce sadness. That's got the pulses racing. Katharina Volckmer, welcome up to the stage. Take your seats. How are you? Is the mic okay?
I think so. I think also I'll need it.
Yeah, you might need it. I might not. Let me know if I don't need it. Let me know if Katharina needs it.
Very impressed by that.
By what? The microphone?
No, by the fact that you don't need a microphone.
Well, blessing and a curse sometimes. Welcome to Leeds. How have you found it?
I really liked it. We've been on a little tour earlier, and I think I've seen the place where Marks and Spencer was born. That was very exciting.
I know where to take them. Yeah, we had a little tour. We went to the market, went to Eden's bookshop, and then we had a little bit of dinner, didn't we? So, and then we came up here to meet this lovely audience. Katharina, they say you should never judge a book by its cover, but we've got a very plain cover, and then we have a cover with a blow-up doll on it. Can you just tell me what's going on in your second novel? Calls may be recorded for training and monitoring purposes.
So one thing that's interesting about that second cover is that it's the cover of the French edition, and I think it's the first time in the history of publishing that a French cover makes it to the UK, because they're usually considered, and they are often quite ugly. So it's quite they're very excited that the French cover was picked for the UK.
Because Indigo do really cool covers, though. Indigo Books do some cool covers, and I thought it was. Well, actually, I've got the French edition as well. So, but they brought that over, and
They did, yeah.
wow. What's the French version of the book called?
Oh, Wonderfuck.
Okay.
But that was my UK publisher said that she's wonderful. She's a woman of a certain age, and she said she saw things on Google Images that she will never unsee, because she Googled the title and then told me we couldn't have it in the UK. So, which I respect. I always respect that. I respected Susie's decision.
Well, for those who've not read this book, you must be wondering what on earth is going on in it. So, can you tell us, Katharina, what is this novel about?
Well, it's about a man called Jimmie who works in a call center. It's a day in his life, and he has all sorts of issues, I would say, and his callers also have all sorts of issues, and they sort of collide in a way that I hope is entertaining for people. And Jimmie is an immigrant like me, so I quite like to. Also, I should say he's not here tonight, but my partner's Italian, and everyone always thinks that he's Jimmie. He isn't.
Jimmie's Italian, isn't he?
He is Italian. My partner's Italian, and he thinks I've written him into my book, which I promise I haven't done. He's been getting lots of sort of strange questions ever since the book was published, so I do feel a little bit bad about that.
Well, when we first meet Jimmie, he is desperate for the toilet, and I don't think I've seen such an articulate start to a book about when one needs the toilet. But please tell me, why did you choose this scene in this incredibly artful novel? But why this scene, and why start with that?
Well, he shits himself basically on the first page, and the really wonderful thing about it is that a lot of people have since come up to me and said, "This has happened to me as well," and they should share their stories. So it's been quite liberating for them, I think, and I just. Maybe that's why I put it in there. I just think I'm quite interested in taboos, and we always think we live in a sort of society that's gone beyond taboos. But if you take something that small that has happened unacknowledged to a lot of us, people have quite interesting reactions to it. So, and I think it's also because I think he's a character who's prone to traumatizing himself, which is something I'm quite, because we talk a lot about trauma, but I think he has a talent for doing things to himself, and that sort of culminates maybe in that scene. So, but I was quite, because also, if you feel sorry for yourself and something like that happens to you, that's kind of in a way it's the peak, but then also it's funny. No, you can't really feel sorry for yourself anymore after something like that happened to you. So it's that kind of. I think it's the kind of mood of the character in a way. No,
You're like, this is Jimmie, this is my guy, this is the guy that I'm going to write about.
Yeah, and I think it's also about letting go, because in many ways he lets go. No, he doesn't care anymore, and I think that's part of it. And I'm always quite interested in what happens when people do that. And a friend of mine who told me that this had happened to him on his way home. He had a similar experience, and he said, "Then I just let it happen, and it was fine." So, yeah, I think it's about that in many ways. Yeah.
But it is a very artful novel, and as Colm Tóibín said, there's all these different levels to it, and that is what you're so skilled at, is what you did in The Appointment, all these different fantastic registers, low and high. I don't know if you could give the audience a bit more understanding through doing a reading.
I thought I'd read that first call. Not going to read the shit scene because that's a bit too long. Well, I can read you. So the first sentence is just, where is it? If you are going to shit yourself, it's most likely going to happen on your own doorstep, which I think is probably true.
That was a line from the book, by the way. That wasn't.
But yeah, that's not my personal, anecdotes. That's just. Yeah, but I think that's true, right? Something about that. Sorry, we'll talk about other things. So this is the opening of the middle section, which is called A Day. Thank you for waiting. My name is Jimmie. How can I help you today? You know that thing about sharks, how they can smell a drop of blood from miles away? I have a skin condition that makes me scratch quite a bit. Can you guarantee that I'll be safe in the waters outside Mykonos? You do realize that Mykonos is in Greece, sir? Are you trying to tell me that there are no sharks in the Mediterranean? The lipstick had begun to crumble at the corners of Jimmie's mouth, the cheap red lipstick that he wanted his lover to see. He had stolen it from one of the many little boxes in his mother's bedroom the night before, when he'd come home from work to find her asleep. His mother, the signora, the most widowed widow of them all, the Italian lady with the unpronounceable surname, Bevilacqua. Asleep for most of her life, afraid of the colors outside her bedroom, forever in love with her own sadness. A life hidden beneath dust and unwanted bits of sympathy. A tragedy with only her son as an audience. A drama wasted on a new country that would never be more than her unfinished dream. What about the sharks then? Do you reckon your blood has the same color as my lipstick? Excuse me? I'm just trying to picture it. You and your broken skin, the deep blue sea and the villain with the scary teeth. Have you been thinking of a great white shark? Are you out of your mind? I'm just a very visual person, and since we've been trained to take our customers' concerns seriously, I want to see what you're seeing. Where exactly do you tend to scratch? Do you think it's likely that's where the shark will attack first? Fucking freak. On, Jimmie imagined a cloud of blood pouring forth from a severed, middle-aged limb, with bits of flesh and a pair of those fancy, multicolored swimming trunks floating around. Underwater cries muffled by the violence of the sea. He suddenly envied the shark its freedom to fulfill its urges, and he decided to follow the animal's example and mute his telephone, even though the first hour of his shift wasn't up. Even though the rules of the call center didn't allow him to get up to stare at himself in the mirror for a minute, or to cry into his unbuttoned trousers on one of those unhinged toilet seats. But Jimmie didn't care, because he wanted today to be a different day, a soft day, like a subtle shade of pink, a day without hurt.
Day without hurt. Yeah, we've got an idea of the range there, haven't we? And the call centre, such an interesting environment. I don't know many novels set in a call centre, but I've worked in a call centre. Okay,
Me too.
Have you worked one? Where did you work?
Well, I did. I feel bad about that. Before I started uni, I worked in one of those places where you cold called old people and sold magazine subscriptions. I still feel a bit bad about doing that. And then I did work in a call center similar to where Jimmie works, which was, do you know Secret Escapes, where you can book holidays?
I think I do, yeah.
Yeah, I worked there
Okay.
for some time after. That's a bit like the thing about shitting yourself. A lot of people have worked in call centers. It's like a similarly.
At some point in our life, we've all shit ourselves. Well, you know, babies. But we've not all worked in a call centre, perhaps, but tell it the thing about.
Where did you work?
I wonder what you're going to ask me then. Where did I work? So I worked. It was a. This is not very interesting, but it's in a builder's merchant. So I used to call builders and sell products. So you can imagine the kind of conversations you have with builders. But what I find interesting is that you can be on the phone doing your job, social standards, manners, and then around you there can be some very wild, lewd conversations going on off the headset. Just tell us a bit more about the characters within the call centre that you set in your novel.
Well, so it's and that's like a parallel to the place where I used to work. It was a sort of multilingual place, so there are lots of other kind of European immigrants, or Eurotrash as I like to call us, working there, talking to people in the different languages. So the atmosphere is one where you hear all sorts of languages, and then obviously I had to write a German character into it, Wolf, who's the guy who gets to sit with Jimmie, and there's an English character, there's a Swedish character, there's someone who is from Spain, so it's that kind of world. And I think it's also a little bit the world you live in if you are foreign, then when you move abroad, you move abroad and then you become foreign. You sort of tend to hang out with people, from your own country or sort of other European countries, and I think that's also reflected maybe a little bit in that book. Yeah.
What is it about that experience then, of being from abroad? The alienation, the need for connectivity,
I think the need for connectivity. I think there is initially because I'm quite interested in loneliness. I mean, that was in the appointment already as well. And living in London, I'm quite fascinated by how we are, 10 million people, and a lot of people are desperately lonely. And I think there is this kind of loneliness that comes with the sort of experience of moving abroad, at least initially. And then I think there'll always be certain spaces that you don't feel like you belong or very, very comfortable. Like that pub we walked past earlier, for instance.
I know some members of the audience will know this pub. I took Katharina past a pub, and I mentioned, these are the old-fashioned drinking halls of Leeds. Yeah. And then we spoke about, and we talked about some of the experiences of what it might be like to go in there, for want of a better word, didn't we? And you were talking about and it was a very cultured conversation. It wasn't, it was like, this is this part of Leeds, and
but I think it's a kind of normal part of that experience. But I'm quite interested in that. How you also. I remember when I was growing up in Germany, in our village, there was a woman living opposite us from Signora Paduano. She was from Naples. Okay. And in the 40 years that she lived there, she never learned German, not properly. We always talked to her in some kind of random Italian, whenever her cat was missing. And and I'm quite interested in those dynamics. And there's also a lot of beauty in it. I think it's also something to celebrate. I think
the need to find connectivity with someone.
I think and I think what interested me in the call center setting is also the forms of intimacy that are possible there, the anonymity that comes with these. I don't know if you had that with the phone calls with your builders, but in the phone calls I had, people, they asked me out on dates. There was all sorts of stuff coming up. They were very.
I didn't get asked out on a date, but I do get what you're saying. There will be people that catch you in a part of their day where they overshare.
Yeah, they do, and also that because Jimmie works in the complaints section, which is kind of an exaggeration of what I used to do, which is partly inspired when I saw somewhere that there's a call center where people deal exclusively with complaints about TfL, the Transport for London. Okay. And I thought, you sit there for 8 hours a day with people yelling at you because their train is late or something like that. What that does to people. But also if you look at your toilet paper, or whatever you buy, there's a telephone number you can call product. And I think the reason why people do that often is because they want to talk to someone, they're alone,
So on that subject of talking to people, communicating, what I find interesting is that, and not to speak too much about your last book, but you brought us from the confidentiality of the doctor's waiting room, where your narrator in that novel felt like that they could share all, body and mind. But the biggest difference for me in the call centre is you can't rely on the monologue to do that anymore, because that novel, The Appointment, was this monologue. A character perhaps oversharing some elements of their life, can we say?
Yeah.
You've got to let us inside Jimmie's mind. Can you tell us about some of the choices to do that?
Yeah, I think that was two reasons really. One was that I didn't want to write another monologue that would sound similar to the first one. I wanted to do something that was clearly different in terms of form. And then I also always had this phobia, because I thought, and that really makes no sense, but I'm going to say it anyway, because English is not my first language. And so I thought I wouldn't be able to write dialogues in it. For some reason, dialogue seemed like something that I shouldn't attempt because I was a foreigner. That's really stupid. But then I thought I wanted to challenge myself to doing that. And this book has a lot of dialogue, and I actually quite enjoyed doing that. But it was sort of important to me to do something that was formally quite distinct from the first book, because I could quite easily, I think, write another monologue and that would be funny, but then that didn't feel like I was going somewhere, you know, that would feel like doing the same thing.
So thinking craft-wise, was it difficult to do? Was it new to do?
It was quite exciting. I quite like a challenge, you know. I quite like doing that. So that was actually quite enjoyable. But it was an important decision, I think, in terms of craft, because I think you have to reinvent yourself. No, you have to, you know, keep doing new things and also challenge yourself, I think, so it doesn't get I don't want to bore myself, because I think if I bore myself, then probably I'll bore the readers too, you know. So yeah.
Perhaps. I mean, what does dialogue do then that you couldn't do in The Appointment, for instance? Because your novels are about what people do tell us and don't tell us. So what does dialogue do in that respect, or not do?
It's a different form of. Well, I guess the Appointment is also, she gets a little bit of feedback from the doctor, no, but it is mostly a monologue. But the dialogue, I think, is a little more. Well, it has a different dynamic, I think, and it's also, especially towards the end of the book, it's, as I said, I'm interested in, because I think combined with loneliness, I think people have problems with intimacy. I think people find it quite difficult to be really intimate with others. I mean, they can be sexual, but I think intimacy is something that people are increasingly afraid of. And in this book, people are trying to sort of find forms of intimacy, and the anonymity on the phone enables that in some cases. And it's also an homage. I don't know if you guys had that here, but in Germany in the 90s, when I was growing up, you got a lot of adverts for like telephone sex on TV after like 10:30 or 11. And when I was a teenager, also in the telephone booth, like telephone sex was a kind of a big thing. And it's a bit of an homage also to that kind of, because that's obviously has, now that you have camera phones, it's become something else.
But what is that? What is that then? You know, why is the telephone? It's still the telephone, isn't it? Whether it's an iPhone or, you know.
If you can't see the other person, no, that creates. I mean, obviously in call centers, people do Google the callers as well, so it's not as kind of anonymous as some people might think. But still, I think if you can't see the other person, that's quite or can be an interesting situation.
So thinking then about the characters and the people that Jimmie interacts with, do you have an idea of who these people are? Are they voices or?
No, I have quite a good idea of who they are, I think, yeah. And they're also seeking that intimacy, I think, and they, you know, sometimes you say things to strangers that you wouldn't say to your wife, or, you know, like sometimes I think there are these moments with people that you can catch, you know, at bus stops at night, or I don't know when, but I think they can be quite precious, I think, amidst all the trash, but I think they can.
Yeah, and that's not about sex or anything. That's just literally about finding a connection, isn't it, with a person, with someone at the moment in time that you need it. But it doesn't always go like that, does it? With some of the callers, you get some abuse as well.
He does, because I guess the other side of that is what we do with people that we can't see. You know, I think everyone has picked up the phone and said awful things to someone in the call center. And I was interested in that as well, what it means for people when they're invisible at work. And I think also generally people who are immigrants tend to be less visible anyway, and then they often get jobs like this where they're not visible. You know, they work in all sorts of places where we can't see them, and what that means. You know.
Yeah, not to talk about the economics of a call centre too much, but there was a massive thing years ago when Vodafone brought all of their call centres back to the UK, and this was a big selling point. And for whatever reason, people find ways to, is it a cultural thing that people have to be abusive to people down the phone, or it is the other side of intimacy, isn't it? The other side of intimacy is I'm hidden, and it's like the internet, trolls and things. Yeah. I can say what the hell I want, and be hidden from it.
Yeah, and it's sort of quite unregulated. I mean, obviously you can hang up at some point, but it is quite troubling, I think, what people think or how they think they can treat other people. And it's a good comparison, I think, with the trolling. Yeah, it's something. It's kind of like live trolling.
So is it a cultural symptom then? It's not even though it's a modern call centre, is it a cultural idea that you think is there that you've addressed?
Yes, and I think it's also to do with these sort of what I like to call the inbuilt frustrations of capitalism, no? Okay. Because I think a lot of systems are created in a way that they cause people a lot of grief. You know, the thing where you have to put in a 13-digit number and your number has 12 digits and then you're fucked because the thing doesn't work and you can't get anywhere and then you have to call someone. And, those kind of situations. Because a lot of places are like fortresses, no? You can't really reach anyone, or it's like if you've ever tried to call HMRC or something like that, it's like you're in hell, you're like literally in hell. I've almost cried on the phone once.
That's the way I think many ways.
So I think it's also that there are so many things almost designed to give people pain and grief. I mean, work itself is often designed in a way, I think, to make people unhappy, but also these kind of situations where we've all been there, no?
Yeah, I don't know. Feel free to reject this, but I don't know why, but tonally, structurally, you're a very different writer to Kafka. But this is why sometimes you remind me of Kafka. No, it's an odd, but just these kind of bureaucratic hells that people are in, and even the appointment to some extent. It was someone born into a body that they felt trapped in. It reminds me of Metamorphosis, for instance. Not to make overreach too much, but people brought into situations and trapped within them. I mean, is Jimmie trapped, or is that my reading?
He is, but no, he is, I think. But he also enjoys the entrapment a little bit, I think. But in the end, he breaks out of it, because I think I'm always interested in people seeking to liberate themselves, and even if it's a sort of incomplete liberation. I don't want to spoiler it, but he finds a form of liberation in the end. I always think it's still worth it, like even if you if you can't get the whole thing, but it's still worth it to try and go for it. And another aspect of Jimmie is that he's overweight, and so the sort of being invisible at work has a kind of, it's quite special for him in a way, but then also difficult. So the being invisible is something that he desires, but at the same time it makes it even more difficult for him, I think. Yeah. No, but in the end he breaks free, and maybe an unusual way, but he does get out. In a
Volckmer-esque way, I would say. That's it for part 1. Tune in next time for part 2. We talk about jokes, clowns and mothers in this beguiling novel from Katharina. As always, like, share, subscribe to the Rippling Pages podcast. That's it for now. Thanks very much. See you next time.